Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of It's Going to Be All Right. And there's a reason that I said good morning, because this one is actually recorded in the morning for the
Yeah.
first time, I think.
You know, when we first were pitching this idea, we had sat down and said, it would be great that we could get together once a week, first thing in the morning at like 7 or 8 when we come in at the start of the week, and just get this out of the way. And it hasn't
That
happened.
was the original plan.
This is the first time that we've actually gotten close to living up to the original plan.
So, as all of you know, or all of you, let's just pretend that everybody listens to this podcast. But the first episode was recorded in the studio at the university. And that was the plan, that we were supposed to meet up once a week and do it from like 7 to 8, so it wouldn't be in the way of other tasks. And then we could have the studio alone, and it would be very like easy to do. But we recorded one episode, and just, I think it was about a week later, the university closed down.
The world
COVID
went crazy.
Wave number 1. So the rest of season number 1 was recorded, from home on a remote call, just like we do now. And also, this is the last episode of season number 2, and still home.
We'll see what next year brings, but it's probably going to start out the same way that the year ended.
Probably. So what is this episode supposed to be about? That's kind of... haven't said anything about it.
No. So thanks for sticking with us this long. Let's tell you what we're getting into. We usually try to do 2 episodes a month, but with the obviously end of the year, and we thought, hey, season finale, season greetings at the same time. Let's throw one in because, well, working at a university, there's a lot of things that need to get tied up. Everybody seems to be busy.
Super busy.
So that includes us. And we just thought we could take this as a bit of a retrospective. You know how everybody usually likes to do, the top 10 songs or the top 12 songs of the year. We weren't smart enough to plan ahead and talk about the top 12 episodes that we've done. But, like a kind of a bit of a year in review for us, how we think the year has went, what life at university has been like, the adjustments to what I guess you could call hybrid learning environments, hybrid working environments. So just an easy one, nothing too heavy, bit of reflection.
It might
a bit
become
of thought.
very, very heavy, if you start talking about all the brutal consequences of a pandemic.
Yes, this is true. But
much more
I think
heavy
than we also want to talk about some we also want to talk about some positive stuff too, what we think. Predictions for the future, what we think this pandemic has maybe helped to accomplish. So
I think that's a much better focus anyways, because there's no use in sitting here being, talking about all the stuff that is difficult. But at the same time, it kind of feels like for many people this year has been a grind, I think. At least a lot of the students, it seems like for us who are employees at a university, the day is more diverse. You have more meetings where you have to participate. So it's much more of a conversation going on. You have probably a bigger variety when it comes to tasks. Lecturing, having meetings, creating stuff, new resources. For a lot of the students, it seems like the day can be very monotone. Lectures from the morning until sometime during the day, just sitting on Zoom. I think I think a lot of people experience that as a grind, as a challenging study environment.
And I would say that throughout the year, since we've had to switch over to distance learning and Zoom or Teams meetings and doing a lot of stuff, from a home office with a laptop, digital video conferences, there's been definitely what you've said, the grind of people who sit there and just, this doesn't work for me. I really just want to be around people. And I think, obviously I can talk to many points about that too, but on the flip side, I've also heard a lot of people who said that this actually suits me really well. I don't
Oh,
have
yeah.
to I don't have to commute in the morning anymore. It saved me money. It saved me time. I
And save
can,
the environment if you want to
yeah,
be, think about it in a little bit of a bigger picture.
exactly. And
I'm
some
kind of in
people's
that
workflow.
situation. I'm
Yeah.
kind of in that situation to a certain extent because to me, I have to commute 1 hour to get, or like 50 minutes to get to
Hmm.
Voss. So it's obviously comfortable not having to drive for an hour in the morning and in the day. So that's obviously, there's a lot of positive things about being at home. You can be closer to your family. The flow between work and free time is a lot more uncomplicated. So,
Hmm.
but I mean, there's tons of different consequences. But I do enjoy many aspects of working from home. I mean, the day is already filled up with a bunch of different tasks. Taking care of my kid, making dinner, all this. It takes time, and it's very nice to be able to work from home. It makes so many things easier. But when we talked about this grind, because this is kind of something that I want to get into a little bit, and to me it seems like a lot of people, because of social media, could be Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, doesn't really matter. They take a lot of time, and it seems like people are sitting on Zoom all day, and then at the same time are entertaining themselves using different social media platforms. And when they're done with studying for that day, they continue watching the little screen, their phone, and then at night they reward themselves watching the big screen, Netflix or something. It's just like an inception of different screens of different sizes.
Yeah.
I think this type of situation requires you to do something with your life. And I'm talking about something physical. Getting out of the house, start working out. Just figure out something to do so you get a break from all these different screens, because I don't think that's too healthy.
No, I think that that's a really good point too, that especially with the onset of November, being from southern Canada, it doesn't get as dark and it doesn't get as gloomy. We get a lot more days of sunlight where I'm from. So I know that that's always, I say that to everybody who comes from somewhere else that isn't a Nordic country, that
Wintertime,
your first November is hard. All of the subsequent ones are just as hard, but you expect it to be difficult. So what you say is really a smart thing. Having some kind of a routine to help you out, because yeah, some people really don't enjoy sitting on Zoom meetings all day long. Some people find that a really great way for them to kind of get through their day. But yeah, you're right. This happened to me yesterday. I didn't leave the apartment. I went from work. I took a break, and I just went into the other room and stretched out for a little while, made myself some dinner, was watching YouTube while I was doing most of that. And then I came in and sat back here and worked on some music. And then once, I took a few breaks from that as well too. And then when that was done, I just went back out and sat on my phone for a little while.
I did the same thing.
Yeah,
Not yesterday, but the day before yesterday. I was just at home doing nothing. Like, I was working from the living room, just where I'm sitting right now. I was sitting at the couch for like 8 hours straight. And my body, it felt like my behind fell asleep from sitting in not that much of an ergonomical position.
Yeah.
But then I didn't leave my apartment. I just stayed here. As you said, watched some YouTube, listened to some music, walked around a little bit. But at night I felt I had problems sleeping, and I never do. And it's probably because I'm a fairly active person, so...
Yeah, it's like you didn't wear yourself down through the day.
Exactly, and that put me in a strange position where I couldn't quite sleep, and then my head started to spin, right? I don't think you should give your body that opportunity, because a lot of these thoughts that comes up when you're like going to bed, trying to sleep, depends on what kind of person you are, but I think it's better that you're tired, that you have used your physical and mental energy, and that your body is ready to rest. So this kind of got this giant digression, but I do think that November time, or at least winter time in Norway, requires something of you. You need to take. You
need to take ownership. Take
you need
control.
to take ownership. That's exactly what it is, and this is me being almost like a semi-spiritual when it comes to experiences in nature, but and this is something that I'm very passionate about. If you go out in nature in wintertime and it's a day where the sun is out and it's a clear blue sky, and then the sun goes down, there's no light that is as magical as that. Everything is kind of condensed in just a matter of 60 minutes or something. You will have a light show, which is to me very valuable, and the crisp air, and I think you just need to appreciate all these different aspects. That gives me lots of energy throughout the winter. Just being going outside every day, get some fresh air.
And so I think what everybody's going to be different. Everybody's going to find some kind of motivation, and I think that that's probably what we need at this time of year, more so than when we talked about motivation back in March or April when the first lockdown started, because the days were getting longer. But, thinking of how to come up with some kind of a routine that fits something else into your day other than just your studies. And developing enough of a routine that you can stick to it. And this is especially hard for routines around physical activity, which is also very important, not just for your physical health and your kind of physical well-being and your mental well-being, but with a lot of things closed, especially in a bigger city like Oslo. I can't go to the swimming hall, which I'd usually be at 2-3 days a week. All the gyms are closed. The indoor skate hall that I'd usually go to a minimum once or twice a week for 2 to 3 hours, it's also closed. And that's when I kind of started to realize that it wasn't going to be that bad for me, because, I also play music. And the kind of routine that I have with this social group of guys that I write and play music with kind of ends up in this cycle where at this time of year, everybody is busy writing, and then we're busy sort of finishing up our recordings. So I have something to kind of look forward to, and I have something that takes me out of the work environment. I have something that makes me engage with other people, even if it's still digital. I send mixes. That's what I'm doing right now, is I'm mixing all of this stuff. And then what I've realized is really good about this too isn't just that I've kind of forced myself to have human contact with people, but I'm doing something that is productive and I can feel like a product is coming out of it. But then what's very important when you're mixing music is you need to take it and listen to it in many different environments. You should go and listen to it in the car. You should go and listen to it on a couple different sets of headphones. You should go and listen to it, on different speakers that you have in your house. So I kind of end up walking around the house, and then after I've listened to it on, 2 sets of speakers in either room, I put on a set of headphones. I take an extra set of headphones with me, and I just go out and walk and listen to this stuff. Yeah. And realize, like, okay, how does it sound, in a different environment on something else? And I just realize how important that's become to get me out of the house, to go and do something physically active. And this is also something that I do with my research, the importance of going out for a walk.
Going for walks is amazing when it comes to, at least for me, kind of digesting my thoughts in a way. I think some of my more interesting ideas is a product of me going for a walk and using that as a tool. I know that by walking and having this inner dialogue, sometimes it's also it's not even inner dialogue if I'm in a place where it's only me, but that works for me real well. And it's just making connections between different ideas or coming up with a solution to some kind of problem you're experiencing in your writing or work. Or so that's huge to me, going for walks. Like when it comes to just exercise, I my brain is usually not focused on that type of things, and then I'm thinking more about, let's say, just exercising, climbing, or just some kind of strength training kind of thing. But it also gives my brain like a break. So when I come back to trying to solve some kind of problem at the writing center, for example, or some kind of resource that we are trying to make, a lot of these connections seems to have been made by not really thinking about them, in a way.
Yeah.
That's kind of strange, but I think that's the way it works to a certain degree. That, I mean, I think we talked about this during season number 1, but I don't know if it's true, but it's a story about the commander-in-chief of Rikshospitalet, the main hospital in Oslo.
Had to go play tennis, right?
Yeah, he had to play tennis in the morning because he got so much to do at some point. He got so busy that he was like, okay, I can't play tennis. But he quickly realized that he was getting so ineffective that he just had to play tennis in the morning again. Because then the flow of the day would be so disturbed by not being physical in the morning for him. So I think this is important advice for students especially. And I mean, throughout this whole situation of working from home and second lockdown and all this, I realized that I've been extremely fortunate because my family's here, my parents live relatively close, and at the same time, my hobbies and stuff, I've been able to do my hobbies as much as I want during the pandemic, because it doesn't really matter if the climbing gym closes. I've been able to train at home or just get outside. So my life haven't really been that affected. But now my family has went to Stavanger to visit my family. My wife and my kid has went to visit her father. So now for the first time I'm alone.
You're truly alone.
I'm alone for a week plus, and it's and now I'm kind of understanding that living like this for 3-4 months at a time, not very healthy for your mental health.
No.
It's then you really need to take the bull by its horns in a way, and try to take control of your own life, because it's, to a certain extent, it feels like you are your own worst enemy. Like, it's so easier to give in to all these like really crappy behavior when you're alone.
Yeah, the small vices. Sleeping until 10 o'clock, taking a nap, going for an early lunch, eating junk food.
Yeah, just all structure just falls apart because like one thing is making dinner for your like partner and your kid and all these kind of things, but when you're alone, it's then it's more like you don't have to.
Yeah.
So it's very easy to not do it. And I think these kind of choices, then it's important to take the hard route when you're alone, because that's what maintains some of the structure that makes you happy, that makes you do something, that makes you preoccupied.
Don't give in to the easy temptation.
And I mean, this is just my life advice from me. I'm 34 years old. I've lived a very long time. But personal development doesn't really come from being comfortable. It comes from being uncomfortable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I have to say, I've had these experiences too, where first year that I, graduated from high school, went off to the big city and university, and I thought, oh, this is going to be so great. I'll get to meet new people. I'll get to do so many new things. And in a way I did, but a lot of things that I also used to enjoy doing, I found within about a year, I wasn't doing them that much. I wasn't skateboarding nearly as much as I thought that I would. And I started to realize that was predominantly because all my life, I had people to skateboard with. I had
Yeah.
one of my brothers. I had my neighbors a couple kilometers down the dirt road. There were just like these little pockets of people about my age growing up, who we all ended up becoming friends, and we just skateboarded together all the time. And the moment that I went to university, even though there's skateboarders all over the place, I didn't know any of these people, and I never felt like I got in with any of them. So there's a year or two where I was just barely on my skateboard, and it kind of realized, you know, I need to go and do this for myself just as much as I need to go and do this because I enjoy the activity with other people. And you're absolutely right. I could look at other things that I do. I should be practicing guitar a lot more. But then this sort of stuff can fall over into your work habits as well. I should maybe be setting goals at this time of year. Have one article read each day. Especially as a PhD, you get these sort of up periods and then you get these down periods. And I'm in one of the down periods right now, waiting on people to come back to me. Everybody's busy because it's the end of term. So my project is currently kind of spilling from December into January before I can really get going on the next stages. And then just having this realization that I don't need to wait until the end of January to keep moving forward. So always trying to stay those few steps ahead of yourself has been enough to help me fill up my day. Now, it's not an incredibly busy day. It's not always the fastest day. It's not always a day that is from 8 until 4. But it's not one of these days where I get up and I start at 10 and I end at 1 or 2. And I think I'm also very fortunate in the same ways that you have said. I have somebody who lives with me, who also works from home 2 or 3 days a week, but she is very much one of the types who says, no, I need to be in the office. I need that separation. And I can understand how difficult that is for people. I've been working in this room. I wrote my master's thesis in here. I had basically one entire semester with no courses, and I could just sit here and have that schedule, 9 to 4 every day, Monday to Friday, and maybe a little bit over weekends if needed. So I do understand that I'm going to have these periods. Some days, I start earlier, I work later, things spill over to the next day. Other days, there's not so much, but I don't need to be in the office as much as other people. But then I realize how important it is to still maintain regular contact with someone, because I've sort of lost the group of people that I can sit and talk about my research with. Not necessarily to explain it to them, but to help me work through my ideas. And within my social group, the people that I see on a regular basis here in Oslo, that's not really topic of conversation that comes up. So if I'm sitting there struggling with something, it's easy to get into your own head, especially if you're someone who can work well alone. You might not realize the importance of having that check-in with either your supervisor, a colleague, a close friend, and not necessarily for them to really understand what you're working with, but for you to verbally grapple with challenges that you have and kind of find a solution for yourself.
This is kind of what we've been talking about so many times, giving advice to people who are working with a thesis or a term paper, that try to explain complex ideas that you're working on to other people, and preferably people who doesn't know anything about what you're talking about, because that makes the challenge even greater. And then you need to choose your words carefully so they understand what you're talking about, but you also have to try to not simplify it, because that's an important aspect of it. Don't try to simplify it, just change the wording and find a way of explaining it that makes sense to other people who doesn't know all the technical terms. And that is probably very beneficial for yourself when it comes to getting ownership of a certain idea or something that you're struggling with in your own work.
And these are all things that are kind of tough, because they really are a personal motivation and a personal development. And like you've said, you don't get better by being comfortable.
No, you don't.
These are things that you need to do, and that has had me thinking a lot about what's the future going to look like, the future of education, the future of work environments, because I think after this pandemic, there's probably going to be a lot of people who say there's no need for this Monday to Friday, 8 until 4, 9 to 5 in the office every day. We can still be productive with home office. I don't want to sit in traffic forever. But at the same time, the amount of personal learning that people have had to do to understand how to work from home and how to deal with IT problems and, new technologies that have come in, I don't think this stuff is going to go away. Because there will be a portion of the population who will be so happy to be back and have a bustling office life again. And there's going to be probably a good portion of the population who's going to say, okay, well, I can come and do this a couple days a week, but don't expect me to be here. I can be just as productive from home.
Quite a lot, actually, because I think it's going to be like when the pandemic is finally over at some point, it's probably going to be a reaction with a lot of people where they are socializing a lot, want to get back to the office, and it's kind of like a reaction to, being at home, having limited amount of social contact and not being in the workplace. So that's probably going to go on for a little while, and then we're going to have all these people that are pretty comfortable with working from home, because, it is, and I'm one of them. I do like to get into the office a couple of times a week. But I don't need to be there every day, and it has nothing to do with the people that I'm working with. It's just, I'm kind of used to working like this in my previous jobs as well. And first as a student, I was not really the guy to sit at the lesesal. I don't know the word in English.
The reading or the study hall.
Yeah, I was never there. I was like in my apartment, working much better alone. Also with someone else in the apartment, that doesn't really matter as long as they left me alone. My previous job was very flexible. I was lecturing in pedagogical theory for the most part, and then also doing some traveling. So I could work from the office, and I also did. It was a nice arena to talk to people and get into interesting projects. But I was also working a lot from home. So I'm just used to it, and it works for me. So I'm one of the guys that, it's nice to get back to the office to a certain extent, but to me the flexibility is very important.
And I think that's something that I hope we don't end up taking for granted. And I sort of hope that we could see, especially within education, this continued mixed approach or hybrid approach where we don't need to expect people to come to class every day because we have a solution to engage with those people as well, in some way, shape, or form, be it the lecture slides are just, and most professors do this anyways, the lecture slides are made available. Of course, I think it's important that you're in contact so you can engage with the material and ask questions about it. So it's going to be interesting to see how we end up approaching education in the future, as well as just generally how work unfolds. Because I think once you get into a professional environment, there probably will be a bit more flexibility. If it saves money to do things digitally, why get on a plane? Why get on a train? Why get in a car when you can do it?
Like private companies, a lot of companies have that thoughts. I do think like in university, which in Norway is not private for the most part, they are government run. Then it's a little, the process usually is a little slower and a little more stuck on traditional ways of doing things. But at the same time, I can't help but think about one thing is the flexibility that I hope will stay, but it seems like we've been talking about this earlier as well, but there's a lot of people who, for years it has been people that has tried to do online courses and studying online. It hasn't really been working that well, I think. Some of them has probably been pretty good, but a lot of it hasn't really worked out. So now all these structures are in place, and I think it can make it a lot easier for a lot of people that are, they want to be in one place but still want to go to university, save the environment with less driving, less traveling around. So let's see. I mean, it's kind of hard to say, because when the vaccine comes and if it works and society kind of slowly gets back to normal, I mean, what's going to disappear and what's going to stay when it comes to the COVID mindsets? It's kind of hard to say.
It's anybody's guess. But I also think that with the changes that we have had to face over, more or less the last year, and they will continue. As I say, we shouldn't expect that January 1st, all of this is just going to be over.
No.
But not just having the flexibility in the working space, but I've been thinking a lot about how, as I had mentioned, having a better grasp on technology and understanding some sort of computer literacy has become more important for people, even at a very basic level. This whole idea of, kind of being a continuous learner, being able to learn how to operate in new contexts and new situations. And I think for any student who's listening to this, especially because next semester we'll have the second year master's students finishing their thesis, looking for jobs, even for some PhDs as well, trying to speak to how important it is to understand the process of research is more than just coming up with ideas, and it's more than just, writing a thesis or writing a cuppa or writing articles. It's what we work with all the time, building up all of these other sorts of useful skills to have. Being able to cooperate with people, being able to communicate with people, and not just communicate in writing, but to be able to clearly communicate your ideas in speech, being prepared and on point for meetings, in conferences. I mean, the number of, it's been a bit of a mixed bag for lectures, where you see some people who have given lectures and it's really on. They're very well prepared. Things are thought out well. They found ways to engage with, the imagined audience that is not sitting with them. And then there are other people where the moment a technical difficulty happens, it derails a lot of stuff. So that's what I think is also very important for the future.
An important skill set for students that are about to graduate. I mean, you and me are, in a way, fairly new in the working environment. Like, I've been working for a couple of years. I took my master's degree, and then I was working with something completely different for a couple of years. Then I went back to school, studied for another year, and then got a job at Østfold University College, and now I'm at NMBU. So I'm fairly new in the business, and so are you. You're like at your second year of as a PhD student, isn't that true?
Yeah.
So, what are our experiences? I do feel like, as you said, technical stuff. This is something that I never really been too interested in. I know that you're different than me when it comes to that, but this is something that I've just been forced to learn. Like, a basic knowledge of how to use different programs, how to edit a video, how to shoot a video, how to do a conference call. All these things are very important. So I think for anyone who's going into the workforce, let's say summertime or something, that's a big thing. Being able to use all these different technological devices.
Learning certainly doesn't stop when you leave university.
And it might be quite different than you think, because you get out from the university as a kind of like a specialist and what you decided to write your thesis about. But that's probably not what you're going to work with. Unless you take a PhD that is about the same. But most people don't do that. They end up in a job which is quite different. So, I mean, the thing here is that I think a lot of people don't get this, and we've been talking about it before, but what is the most important aspect of writing a master's thesis? Is it the research, or is it all the different processes that you go through?
It's definitely the cumulative skill set, the processes of learning how to think critically, being able to find information, assess, analyze that information, find synergies and interlinkages, differences, patterns, finding solutions to problems.
And demonstrating that you can deliver, like
yes.
that you start out a project from start to finish, and going through all these difficult phases of what it takes to write a master's thesis. I think that is, and a lot of people don't really get this, and I didn't either. When I finished my master's thesis, I kind of envisioned that I would work with something relatively similar. That didn't happen. But a lot of the things that I learned when doing my thesis, or when writing my thesis, I'm not talking about like exactly what I was writing about, but more just a personal, kind of this personal journey that you go through, where you have to change, because it is at times painful and difficult and hard. And that's what, going back to what we talked about earlier, that's what the end result is, some kind of personal development. And I think this is something that you will also encounter when you get into the workforce. It's quite different than you might think, and they might require a skill set that you don't have yet.
Mm-hmm. So a case in point, and I've probably mentioned this in previous episodes, my wife left university thinking, okay, good, I'm done. The thesis is over. I'm never going to have to write something as extensive as that.
Again.
And she has now had, for the past 7 years, I believe it's been about 7 years, she has been working in environments where regular reporting and regular data analysis are made, and reporting on that data, submitting it on a regular basis as short reports or as long reports, are a predominant part of her job.
Yeah.
So she's writing every single day, and she's having to apply these skills, and she's just changed over jobs, and so now she has to learn a new database set, and she has to learn the new programs that they're using to understand how to make all of this work within the kind of pre-existing framework of knowledge that she already has from her education and her previous work experience. So don't leave thinking that you're never going to have to write again.
Oh no, you're probably going to have to write a lot in most jobs, to be honest.
You're going to be applying for jobs, and you have to write cover letters, right?
You're going to have to write cover letters, and I mean, if you went to the university, there's a big chance that you're going to end up in a job that includes some type of writing. I mean, that's probably what you're qualified to do. Writing stuff, sitting at the office, like an office job. Another thing which is important is, it seems like, and this is kind of strange to say in an academic context, because there's a lot of focus on people that are specialists, work with one specific topic. They did their master's degree, did their PhD, now they're a postdoc or a professor, and they're like a specialist in one very specific thing. As you like you always like to mention this journal about like microbiological virology or something.
Virology, yeah.
Yeah, that kind of guy, right? There's a lot of focus on that kind of archetype of a person within academia. But in reality, to me, it seems like, yes, there are these experts, these specialists, but in most cases, you want a person that is a jack of many trades, not a master of one. Like most people in the workforce are required to do lots of different things, not only one thing. You have to be able to communicate to people through speech, talk to people, cooperate with other people, not just sit alone, do some writing, organize things, make some products. I mean, there's a lot of different things that you probably have to do. My job is extremely varied. I have to do so many different tasks. And it's not only sitting at the writing center and thinking about academic writing. It's a lot more.
And you and I are, I think, in a very similar position, even though you do something that I would really also like to be able to do full time with work at a writing center and learning center. But yeah, what are some of the things that we do? Okay, well, we we podcast, so we need to be able to have some kind of communication skill. We need to do some kind of research, some preparation to develop what we think is a worthwhile topic.
And some episodes are easier than others, of course. But still, there's some planning. And then you have to edit the whole thing.
Yeah, exactly. So there's technical skill involved in editing. I've had to learn a lot more in video editing since we've started filming just from web cameras. And that introduces a whole other world that you can improve upon. But now that's another skill that I have. I can make a different type of product. And I hope that it's being made at a high enough quality for what we currently have and what we're currently trying to do. But that's some other skill that I can demonstrate in the future. I'm not just someone who, go read all of these reports and summarize it. Even though that's something that I am currently doing with my PhD. You and I both have to have regular meetings with students, with staff. We have to pitch ideas on a fairly regular basis. That you and I sit around on a weekly basis. Yeah, that we sit around and spitball stuff. Hey, how could we advance the work that we're doing? How could we get more involved in this department or that department? We also have to be kind of creative problem solvers. So, case in point with a meeting that we had yesterday. What are the needs of a professor? What, from the information that we have and the experience we have, could help to solve that problem now, but also solve the underlying causes of that problem for later dates? So yeah, we've suddenly came up with a new idea of like, hey, if we could create a framework, a sort of simple questionnaire that you could go through and ask yourself to almost systematically determine in greater detail, what is your research? Who's knocking on your door there?
No one. It's a digger straight outside of my window.
Oh yeah.
And I have a fireplace that is.
Oh,
shaking.
I see your pipe rattling there. Yeah.
But sorry.
Anyways, I thought it was like a ghost or a tree. Some Spooktober still going on. But
I was
apparently
trying
not.
to pretend like nothing, but it became so intense that it was like. But
yeah, so like a case in point there, that we're trying to come up with not just, hey, go use these resources that already exist, but what's missing? How can we add to it to create something that might solve that problem at an earlier stage before these much larger problems arise? And I mean, this is also the work we do with SWR 100 in Canvas. I also have a series of sort of backlogged conceptual and theoretical projects that I really would like to launch from working with other people. Hey, try this, try that, see if these sorts of ideas end up working for you. So it's not always even just about being able to be really good at something or being able to necessarily just learn how to do something better, but being able to creatively solve problems.
And there's a lot of new problems now because of the pandemic. I mean, there's so many meetings that you and me has been a part of where the learning center or the writing center has been confronted with a problem. And then we have to find a solution to it. And it's usually, coming up with a new resource or making some kind of video or a new platform for students to work, meet each other, lecturing, that kind of stuff. So I think people can be prepared for that you have to be very flexible. You have to have that creative approach to a lot of different things, because I mean, let's say that you go into the workforce in summertime, for example, who knows what happens? I mean, there might still be a third or a fourth wave. Who knows who gets the vaccine first or if it works? And there's a lot of uncertainty. So I think that you could go into the workforce with this thought that you have to be flexible, you have to be creative, you have to be able to shift gears very quickly. That's kind of my experience. I remember when the first lockdown happened, went home. I was like at university in the morning, and it was like it was a very strange experience. It was like being in a ghost house or something. It's only me. I went home, and then during that day, me and you and some of the writing advisors ended up digitalizing everything that we did, from consultations to everything. And it's obviously been a long process after that to fine tune it, but still, I think being flexible, being able to see connections between these different skills that you have, that is important.
I would even say something that is a skill that is overlooked is just being able to listen. And listen in a couple of different ways. In your situation and in my situation, when we're working with staff or students, we're predominantly listening to their problems. What is an issue that you're facing? What is the problem exactly? Can you explain it to us? So that we can use the expertise and the experience we have, that we can think creatively about a possible solution, be it something that already exists or be it something that we're going to need to work on. And that, I think that listening skill to help you become a creative problem solver is very, very useful. But the other side of listening skills and developing them is to be able to listen to criticism. This is something a lot of people are not very good at. So be it as a researcher or, we kind of ask this all the time after any time that we work with students. Was this good? Is this something that helped you out? Did you clearly understand that? Did we miss something? How could we make this better? Having that mentality that we want to listen to just as much as we want to get the praise for a job well done, it's almost more important for me to know what I'm doing wrong so that I can find a way to get better and to solve that problem.
Usually I want to develop something even further, so it's nice to get a pat on the back and job well done, but I would like some feedback. And I would, to be honest, it's much more interesting if someone said, I wish you would talk a little bit more about this, or one more example, or what about this topic or something, so I could keep developing my skills, but also the products, the lectures, the resources.
Exactly.
So.
And from experience, I've definitely met people at the university who that's a big part of what they do. And then I've definitely met people who, you took my course and the criticisms that were leveled towards me, I don't really need to bother with that because you're not taking this course again. And things don't change. And because of my association with other departments and other services that the university offers, I continuously see, each successive semesterly generation of students go through, and that problem that I saw so clearly and had expressed as a problem that if you just dealt with it somewhere in the course, somewhere in the teaching, somewhere in the design of the assignment, or the feedback that is provided, these problems would probably get solved. And, we're still seeing students come to the Writing Center and, we're still kind of working on the same thing that I felt happened to me all of those years ago. And that I really wonder about, how many people really listen to the criticism, and actually listen. Don't just dismiss it. Don't just become defensive about it, but kind of filter through it. What is relevant criticism? What is irrelevant criticism? What's something that you can change? What's something that you can't change? And then find the stuff that is actually workable and use it. And especially if you're a PhD, I really want to try to get a fellow PhD friend on in a future episode to talk about rejection, because I think this is a big part of it. As a PhD, when you're submitting articles, or as a researcher submitting articles too, you feel like you put so much hard work and effort into the work that you're doing, and when you get rejected, you just feel terrible about it. You kind of go on the defensive. You think that basically what these people have given you back is mostly bullshit. It's
They're
but
against you.
but what you really
Yeah.
need to do is kind of carefully go through and assess, okay, is what they have given as reasons for rejection valid? And is it that they misunderstood because they don't really know what this is about? Or did they misunderstand because I didn't make myself clear? If they misunderstood because they're not really experts in the field, there's nothing I can do about that. But if there's misunderstanding because I didn't create a very clear thesis or structure, well, there's something that I can do about it. And what does it mean? Well, I have to go back and I have to work on it more. And that's all that it is. It's just a little bit more work. But being able to listen to the criticism, being able to determine from, thinking about it critically, what is and is not relevant, what can you do and what can't you do, I think is also a very valid skill set to be able to have. And that's probably something that has helped me to get to where I am by not just listening to other people's problems, but I'm constant. Most of the resources I generate, I'm sending it over to you to look at. I'm sending it over to somebody else, another colleague, or, other people who I know who might benefit from it. And I'm getting their feedback before it goes out. Is this good? Do you understand it? Does this seem like it would be useful? What's it missing? What would make it better? And
we have
that's a hugely
conversations
valuable
about
thing.
we have regular conversations about resources. Usually, and we create lectures together for the webinar, and I'm always very keen to hear what you have to say about something, because I definitely respect you. I think you are very competent at what you do. So I want you to take a look at it, and I want your feedback. And if you think it sucks, then you think it sucks. Then I have to make some changes, work with it. And to me, it's also an extra challenge that I, for the most part, enjoy. But it's the whole language barrier. You are a native English speaker. I am not, and to me, it's always kind of a scenario of trying to kind of catch up with the level of competency that is required when you're going to speak English in a professional environment. It's very different than, if you and me are supposed to have a conversation about our hobbies, talking about, let's say some kind of concept in academia, which is a little bit foreign to you, and you have to do it in another language at the same time. It can be quite challenging, but it's a challenge that I very much enjoy, and I know that it will give me a skill set that is extremely valuable in the future, and right now, of course. But I think that's indirectly that is a very good advice for students. Try to most young people now can speak a lot better English than I can, but pay attention to it and try to be comfortable with speaking about many different topics in a different language. I know you experienced the same thing, just the other way around.
Yeah,
it's hard to speak about difficult things in another language.
Especially someone who's only been learning the language for 5 years and not very seriously. Yeah. I haven't taken it very seriously until maybe the last 2 years. So I'm way far behind. But you bring up another very relevant point there about kind of the cross-cultural differences, language differences, style differences, approaches, processes that we may do as well. And that's something that I'm always confronted with, because as a North American, as a Canadian, you're usually like, oh, but you're so polite and you say sorry all the time and the whole world likes you. But we're also kind of just as bullheaded as Americans in many ways. We really tend, or at least I anyways, tend to very much speak my mind. I let people know when something probably won't work and why it won't work. And yeah, that's a good idea, but you maybe haven't considered this. But I'm always trying to do it from the standpoint of how can it help what you're doing to become better in the way that you're trying to do it. But also trying to get through some of these cultural differences. Again, we're dealing with this as we work with an international environment of students, where part of what I see as the problem, coming from my background working in language acquisition, which is funny for somebody who predominantly just speaks English. My experience working as an English teacher, you come into contact with how different people are educated, different expectations of education, different expectations of seniority as well. And even just realizing that when you start to work with someone who comes from a different culture than you, their viewpoint on how to learn or how to do something can be very different.
It can be very different. And sometimes it's the language is one problem, but then you have different modes of thinking about the same topic, which can also be very confusing.
Mental processes that we have to go through can end up being quite different. And learning how to work around those, and learning how to cooperate, collaborate, potentially compromise, but also to help people understand, well, this is why we do it this way. Why do you do it in the way that you do it? Maybe there's some hidden gem of knowledge there that, oh, when you say it that way, that actually makes a lot of sense.
It's in most cases about contextualizing whatever you're trying to explain in the right way. So it needs to hit them. It needs to hit them in the cultural nerve in a way, something that makes sense in their own perception of their surroundings or a particular topic. So coming back to kind of the skill set that I think is important for the future, depending on, it doesn't really matter if the pandemic goes on for another year or not. It's usually, I would say that being competent to at least a certain degree with computers, recording things, creating podcasts, talking to other people over online. This is something that we've been talking about a little bit, and I want to bring it up right now because I had this experience. I think it was like a month or two ago. I had a conversation with a person who is, let's say, just about 10 years younger than me. So she is she's from a different generation, actually. Just trying to click away a box there. Okay. She's from a different generation than me, and we had a conversation. We talked about calling someone. And I said, I like to call because it's much more efficient. You don't have to write a long message. You can say so much more in a quick phone call than you can just, text messaging or texting. And I also like to hear the person's voice. I like to hear how they react to the things that I say. And you get a feel of their mood and what they think about stuff. And she was like, no, I find that very uncomfortable. And the most predominant reason is that I can't edit. So when you write, you can always edit. You can take your time, and you can really, this is what I want to say. But when she speaks, she feels like in Norwegian you would say "bordet fanger," like the table catches it, like in a card game, right? If it's said, it's said. You can't take it back. You can obviously take it back, and you can make some adjustments. But to her, that was created some kind of social uncomfortable feeling. I think that people need to get over that and be comfortable with talking to people. It's more important now than, I wouldn't say more important than ever, but it's very important to keep this social sphere alive, even though there's quite some distance between us at this point.
And I could definitely speak to that when I'm trying to speak Norwegian, and just coming to grips with the fact that I'm going to make mistakes, and I'm probably going to say the wrong words. I'm probably not going to be understood. I'm probably going to say something incredibly embarrassing. And just realizing that it's not going to make anything better if I just keep my mouth shut, if I don't try, because I can always try. Because most of the time the people that I'm speaking to are friends or they're colleagues. They're not people who want to make fun of me. And now I don't suffer from social anxiety or anything like that, and I know that that's a very real issue for many people. And to just say, just get over it. Well, I don't think it's always as easy as that.
It's not that easy. Of course not. But I think you can kind of feed that anxiety by not confronting it.
Exactly. That I think you have some good advice there that, you shouldn't shy away from it. Maybe that sort of hyperactive imagination that everyone is looking at you in the worst light possible is probably not true most of
Probably
the time.
not.
And that's what I had
It's
to deal with, that just with the language of like, oh God, I'm going to sound so dumb, and I'm going to slow the speed down, and everybody's going to just like, why don't we speak English instead? It'll be so much easier. But no, I found like Norwegians are just as awkward in English, even if they understand very well. They'd rather speak Norwegian. So,
of course.
and people understand my situation. People understand where I'm coming from, and you can always try to clarify. You can always try to say it another way. I mean,
And you and me working with students from different countries, one thing is the writing. Let's say that they're not very good at constructing sentences, but you can understand if this person is smart or not by what kind of connections they're making, what they're writing about.
Yeah.
Not always, but usually. And it's the same with language. It doesn't really matter if you are competent in Norwegian or not. I have the same feeling because I have one way of speaking when I speak Norwegian. And I don't necessarily feel like my English it's not the same. It doesn't reflect the same kind of persona to a certain degree. I've gotten better, but at the same time, there is a discrepancy going on. And sometimes I say stuff that is probably very funny. I remember we had a conversation last week or something, and I was talking about, it might have been during a podcast. We were talking about my father hunting with all his hunting buddies, right? And I was saying, yeah, they're just sitting around the fire sharing shit stories. That's directly translated from Norwegian, and it's just very funny in English because
yeah, I do that too, and people laugh, and I don't quite understand, and then maybe it's explained to me, and then I think it's funny, so I just keep doing it. Actually,
yeah, sometimes
maybe
that
I
can
form
be
bad
like,
habits.
No, but I do the same thing because I find it to be this kind of being between languages can create a lot of very very funny words, funny kind of, I don't know. It's but you just have to take it with a grain of salt and have to be humoristic about it. And I think that then people will hopefully find you to be charismatic, and that helps in the working environment.
And, I think that there's a lot of situations where, as young people gaining experience in the world and having interactions with others, it's easy to kind of build up a bad expectation that you start to feel like, oh, I'm dumb. Oh, my writing isn't that good. Oh, my ideas aren't that good. Like I'm just not really going to put the effort in. I'm just going to do what is sort of expected. And I mean, realistically, I can understand where those sorts of mentalities come from, because if you, well, one, the education system doesn't really cater to the various different learning types that are out there, and we have an episode on that. It can take only a few bad experiences, as we say in English. It only takes one bad apple to spoil the bunch. And I think that can be a very real shame. The number of students, especially when it comes to something like English, that they come in and to the writing center and say, oh, I'm just such a terrible writer, and writing in English is hard. And I sit down with them and say, but even though your grammar is incorrect and you've misspelled some words and your punctuation isn't right, like, those are such small details. What I can see is that you actually have a good idea that's worth pursuing. Don't worry about these small technical aspects, because a good person and an intelligent person and somebody who sees the value in your idea will want to sit and understand you. And we'll be able to overlook the grammatical mistakes that happen. I don't sit there and correct my wife all that often, unless if it's something that's like really, really funny. Yeah, but I think that's also kind of coming back to just being able to listen to people. We tend to be our own worst critic a lot of the time, and it takes that reinforcement from others, either positive or negative, to understand, okay, actually, this is a very good idea. It is very well designed. What is it that just is going to help to make it better? Or to understand, oh, you know what? Our ideas that are so clear in our minds are not they're not coming out as fluently as we might hope. And that's usually, with the course that we're working on right now, that is the biggest issue that I see again and again and again. It's people sit there and worry about like, oh, but I don't think my English is that good. No. Your English is fine. I can understand what you're trying to say. The larger issue is you still haven't structured your thoughts in a way that make logical sense to an external person. That's almost the harder thing to work with.
Yes, and I think you're making a very... It's some very good advice there, because it's also about when dealing with other people, I think it's important that you listening, and you've been saying this multiple times this podcast, but I think I have an interesting example. You know that I'm from a part of Norway which is kind of like it's kind of working class dominated area, at least historically. Not now, but historically, and our dialect is very much connected to that kind of people. Having the dialect that I have, you probably haven't picked it up, because I don't think you're necessarily competent enough in Norwegian to pick up the small differences between some of the dialects that are relatively similar. But I have a way of speaking that for most people I just sound very unrefined and super working class and dumb. That's the stereotype. So I had this kind of experience sometimes where I've been talking about something and people just don't take me seriously. It doesn't matter if I'm talking about the most complex issue in the world and I'm an expert. It's just the way that I've decided to pronounce the words, and that's a problem. And I think it can be translated to not being very competent in English or something. You need to listen to what people, their ideas. You need to, people have different backgrounds. Some are good at speaking English, some are not. Some have a funny dialect, some don't. Doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. And this is something that I say all the time too, more focused around writing, but you're absolutely right with speaking, just being able to sit, and the importance as a student and as a researcher to talk through your ideas to somebody while you're committing them to paper, or even before you're committing them to paper, after you've committed them to paper, to be able to refine it. Because what makes sense to you and the clear connections in your head don't always translate that well. And what I call this is writing for yourself. That it's easy to kind of miss important connections or misplace the order of things just because you have so much information and so much knowledge. The curse of knowledge, it's often called. But then on the side of what you're talking about is more what I would like to say, are you trying to sound intelligent, or are you trying to be understood? And this happens in the academic community all the time, this sort of dismissiveness of don't speak simply, like you're in university, you need to speak, bring your level up. Which I think is sort of a funny thing to do because, well, yes, you need to learn some of the technical language about the discipline that you're working within, theories and concepts that can be very loaded and have a lot of meaning embedded in them. But there's a flip side to that too, where it almost seems like people speak or write in a way not to convey a very good idea, but to overinflate a very average idea.
I totally
trying
agree.
To sound smart and
then trying to socially position yourself at the same time. I think that is I think every subculture has that kind of side to it, where some people are seemingly extremely competent with the different elements that make out the subculture, and it could be a way of talking, a way of acting, it could be but I do think that kind of stuff is for the most part problematic, and especially in academia, because it to me it's very much related to academia's a little bit. There's a history of distinguishing people, right? Poor people couldn't afford education, rich people could afford education, and then they learned to speak and act in a fashion that made that difference even bigger, demonstrated the differences in society. And I don't think that's a very good idea if you want to inspire people with an idea. If you want to if you want to see it flourish. So
And maybe that's the more important thing to kind of think about as well is, yeah, people are willing to overlook small issues, small errors in your language, your communication, especially if it's a second or third language. But if the idea is good and worth pursuing, people are going to be interested to see that develop. And I think that that's what the Writing Center is so good about, is the first things that we usually try to do isn't to sit down and start nitpicking small details of people's writing. We work first on the big stuff. What's the quality of the idea here? And again, this comes back to people being able to listen, us being able to listen and extract something, but then also the person on the other side of the table to listen to the feedback, because we are trying to help. And there was a situation one time where some student came in and they just really wanted to use a private consultancy firm report as the basis for a full research article. They hadn't done any other research on the topic. They were planning to simply use that one document as the basis for everything. And I just had to sort of sit there and say, well, but what's the idea behind this? What is the benefit of using this idea? And you do understand that this company is obviously being paid to write this. So there's some kind of a bias there. Are you familiar with that? Can you see that? And not to say that the idea you have is bad, just that it's a bit underdeveloped and maybe over-reliant on something that might not be as strong a source as you think.
And only one source for an entire project seems...
And that was
doesn't seem very good.
No, that was a bit of a tough conversation to have, because this person was just very defensive. But I've read it. I've done my research on this. I'm not saying that you haven't. It's just you have to kind of be able to come back to the idea that you have and see the potential strengths or weaknesses of it.
I just kind of want to relate this to something. It's kind of related, but I do think that some people can be very defensive and they don't really want to get into, okay, then I have to get back to researching, finding new things, maybe something that I'm not too familiar with, and it's scary and uncomfortable and it's a lot of work. But my experience when I got into the workforce after I decided to go back to university, my experience was this, that I had to be very confident, and I would say a lot more confident than I really am. In my previous job, I was put to do lots of different things I had no experience with it at all. So I just had to say, yes, please, give me the mission and I will do my best. And I did my best, but a lot of times it was fake it till you make it. Pretend to be confident, pretend to be competent, and over time, you would build up a skill set. You knew how to handle these situations. But in my opinion, there's not really that much room for, I don't know if I can handle this. You just have to go for it. And obviously be reasonable at the same time. But that is I think a lot of success, this sounds a little strange to say, but there was a lot of success for me in throwing myself, head first into these scenarios and just try to navigate them as best that I could. Because if I would say no, I wouldn't have gotten the mission, the task, and probably wouldn't sit here today.
And I think
that's the reality of it.
An interest in learning something new, an interest in trying something new. You're probably right there. Just being interested and not shying away from something because it's new or it seems difficult at first, because everything is difficult at first. We don't stop to think how difficult it was for us to learn how to walk, right?
No, and you have to, and I think everybody feels like they're kind of afraid of getting exposed at some point in their life, and I think every PhD definitely experiences that. Like, I'm a professional researcher. This is crazy. I don't know anything.
They call it imposter syndrome, where you sit there and wonder, like, how is it that I haven't been found out yet? I'm not smart enough or qualified enough to be here.
I don't even know what I'm doing.
Yeah, and there's been some psychological research. I can't remember the name of it, but it's basically this correlation between the amount of experience you have with something and the amount of confidence you have in it. And very often you'll find people who have absolutely no experience with something have a high confidence in their ability to do it or ability to understand it. And all you have to do, is sit around and talk about current events with people, and suddenly people are, political analyst experts for the United States, or, if they're buying into the stock market, they're suddenly, a professional financier and speculator. They've got no real experience with this stuff, but they seem super confident in what they're doing. And then as you actually get into these things, you realize your confidence drops because you have to start building up experience, but you emerge on the other side with more confidence in the task. And I think that's where that sort of imposter syndrome comes in, is in that dip in the middle as you realize, oh, okay.
I am in trouble now.
But you're not in trouble. You're just learning. That's all.
It's
normal. At the base of learning a new skill.
But at that point in time, you usually, like, I can take myself as an example. I went from one job to the writing center, right? And suddenly I'm supposed to be the coordinator of the writing center, and I'm supposed to know all these writing principles, and I'm supposed to be the king. And I wasn't. I wasn't really familiar with a lot of these writing principles that the writing center is working with, because it's relatively specific to an MBU. So I wasn't too familiar with it. I knew a little bit about it, and some of these principles is stuff that I would practice them, but not as rigid. I wouldn't think of it as as a principle. It would just be something that I would do naturally or have developed over time. So I had this kind of feeling at some point where I was like, this is kind of crazy. Like, now I'm in a situation where I'm supposed to be very competent in what I'm doing, and I'm still learning, and I still have to figure out what all this is about, and holding lectures, doing all kinds of different things, and having ownership over a lot of these things take time. And before you have the actual ownership and the competencies that you need, you just have to be confident enough to try.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think,
don't be scared to fail either.
No, because that's going to happen. And I also do think that Norwegian students in particular, or at least Scandinavians, they need to hear this. I made a choice in my life at some point to not be, I thought, I have to be more ambitious. I have to take more space. I can't be the guy that just waiting to get asked, do you want this job? You seem qualified. Do you want it? You need to get up there and be visible and be competent at the same time, of course. But this is something that Norwegians can learn from, like, North American people. By meeting also a lot of the other writing advisors, young people, but they're very ambitious and they're confident in what they're doing, and they're definitely overconfident in many situations, but it works out a lot better for them than being quiet.
Because when you are overconfident and you encounter something that, oh, okay, actually I don't have that much experience or knowledge about this, it's also an opportunity for learning.
Exactly.
And what do? Do you learn to overcome that overconfidence and build up a necessary skill set? And then usually, at least in my experience, I've seen people become more humbled by that. Or do you shy away from it and decide, okay, I'll just never ever do that again?
Try to land on your feet. And I think the best way to do that is try to connect this new kind of situation and this new skill that you're learning to something that you already know. That would make it a lot more familiar with you, and you will get it kind of under your skin a lot quicker. And then you will have the experience of hopefully landing on your feet, learning something new, and then this confidence that you had to muster up, this kind of fake confidence, now it's justified to a certain degree because you have some experience. You know how to connect this to things that you already know how to do. So
if you've made it this far, listening to us ramble
1.5 hours in, and this hasn't been that specific about writing. It's been about
it's more about just all of these
skills,
these other skills that, from our perspective, our vantage point at the university, and having worked in different environments, and just what we sort of see the world transitioning towards. Your education is important, but it's probably more important to you than it's going to be for your employers. What people are really looking at are how you can handle tasks with the skills that you have developed while being at university. So don't overlook your ability to think critically, to creatively find and solve problems, to communicate with people, to cooperate with people, to be flexible not only in how you work and where you work, but how you can incorporate new perspectives and new ideas that might help to solve these problems that you are tasked with. And
so try as a student, if you're working on your master's thesis right now, what have you learned? And I'm not talking about like, yeah, now I know a lot about chemistry or about, soil, whatever. Don't think about the topic you're writing about. What kind of skills have you learned by working on a project that is that grand? And
what are the skills that you want to strengthen? That's another thing, especially if it comes to for a master's thesis and you're defending. I say this quite often to students. You can sit there and kind of polish your armor, talk only about the strengths of what you have done. But if you're too scared to acknowledge your weaknesses, you're never going to get any stronger.
No.
It's focusing on those weaknesses and finding ways to make them less weak. Strengthening your weaknesses instead of polishing your strengths. That can go a distance for you and make the difference between someone who is maybe a bit socially awkward in those situations where you receive criticism about something, maybe because you didn't think about it, or maybe because you were really kind of scared that people might see that. No, think about those problems, those challenges, those weaknesses and issues that you have, and consider ways that if you could do this again, what would you do differently to make those better? Because that's also a learning skill and a valuable, again, a listening skill, accepting that criticism, finding ways to get better, get out of that comfort zone so that the next time you're in a situation where people level criticism at you, you've maybe already thought about some of your weaknesses. You might have an answer. You might be less defensive. You might be less scared, and more willing to accept what they have to say and find ways to use that to strengthen those weaknesses.
And I think that is great advice for, it's great pandemic advice. Get out of your comfort zone. We talked about this in the beginning of the podcast. In order to experience any kind of personal development, you need to confront things that you find difficult and put yourself in an uncomfortable situation for the most part. And the same goes for, learning new skills, getting used to different environments when you join the workforce. All this is processes that to some extent is going to be uncomfortable, but that's what you learn from. So this is, what you can call it is, isn't that called exposure therapy?
It might be.
I think it is. When people if they're afraid of bacteria, they have to go to the toilet and take toilet water in their face to kind of get over the. This is true.
Over the fear and the phobia.
It's not a joke. I know a guy that actually he told me sometimes I just have to do that. And if I do that, it's going to be all right.
There you go. Happy non-denominational holiday season 2, everybody. We will be back in January with new topics, new ideas. We hope that you get through the current lockdown, enjoy your holidays, and we look forward to what 2021 can bring.
God jul, and we have lots of interesting topics stacked for next season, so you're not going to get rid of us this easily.